Happy Friday and welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Hope you're all well. Hope you've all had a wonderful week so far. Hope you're looking forward to what is a massive game for the Gunners up at St James's Park on Sunday. We're going to be previewing that fixture in great depth and detail on today's pod. We're going to be discussing a number of things. We're going to be talking about how Arsenal should go about it. We'll discuss the approach, some of the criticism that Mikel Arteta's suffered over the last week or so, and whether or not, if you are going to change it, this is the game to do it in. Hear me out. We'll get into that a little bit later on in the show. We'll discuss the starting 11 and we'll take a load of your questions from the live chat. But before we get into the game, which feels insignificant when you read news like the news that we got yesterday, which is that Billy Vigar, a young footballer, just 21 years old, who spent a long time with the Arsenal Academy, sadly passed away due to an injury that he suffered while playing for Chichester. I've read a couple of reports about kind of how it happened. I'm not sure with regards to the details, so I especially when it's something like this, don't want to speculate and make things up. So I'm not going to get into necessarily the details of it, but it was a head injury, and unfortunately he was taken to hospital and he didn't recover from the head injury, and sadly he's passed away at 21 years old. Now I want to send my condolences to his friends, to his family, especially because I can't even imagine what they must be going for. Like, football is something that we all love and we all adore and we're all extremely passionate about, hence all the heated arguments that go on the various platforms and forums. But, you know, when something like this happens, it reminds you, doesn't it, that football actually doesn't really matter that much. And I think there's a famous old quote, and I think it's from a Liverpool legend. I can't remember who off the top of my head. I'm sorry, my head is a bit fried, sort of discussing this and even thinking about this. But football is the most important of the unimportant things, or something along those lines. And it certainly feels like that's the case when you hear news like this. So my condolences and my well wishes to Billy Vigar's family. I mean, 21 years old is no age under any circumstances whatsoever. But when you hear that it's due to an injury that he sustained on a football pitch, playing the game that he loves, man, it's heartbreaking. So my condolences and my thoughts out to Billy Vigar's friends and family. Horrible, horrible news to take into the weekend. There's no doubt about that. Okay, let's turn our attention to the game coming up on Sunday. Massive, massive game for the Arsenal. There's no question about that. Would I go as far as saying this is a must-win game? I'm normally the guy that pushes back against this type of conversation at this stage in the season, because how can a game 5-6 games into the season be classed as a must win? But when you think about what's happened in the last few weeks, the fact that Arsenal now sit 5 points behind Liverpool, who go to Crystal Palace at the weekend. By the way, that's not an easy game. You have to say that. But with 5 points off of Liverpool, and if they win at Crystal Palace on Saturday, that gap opens up to 8 points. Now, we would have the opportunity on Sunday when we go to St James's Park to close that gap back down to 5. But if we were to drop points, then whatever way you look at it, however you package it up, to be 8 or 7 points if we get a draw at Newcastle behind Liverpool, assuming they win, that is a really tough deficit to turn around. Even at this early stage in the season, even with all the fixtures to come, even with the fact that they would still have to come to the Emirates, that, you know, they have to play City twice, that they have to go to Old Trafford, which is never an easy game for Liverpool. Well, I say never. Traditionally, historically, it hasn't been. Sometimes it has, though, particularly in recent times. But the point I'm trying to make is that this feels huge already, and this is a pressure that you could argue we've brought on ourselves, but you can also say that it's a pressure that's been applied on us by Liverpool because of how well they've started in terms of results. Their performances haven't always been great, but they've managed to get the results, and ultimately that's what matters. That's what's put us in a situation where there is very, very little margin for error. The fixture list hasn't helped here. And I suppose if you are going to play these tough fixtures all in a row and all in quick succession, like we seem to be at the moment, you kind of rather that it was at the start of the season rather than at the business end. Some people, again, would make the counter argument and say no, while you're finding your feet as a team, while you're sort of building up to your kind of optimum level, particularly when you've got new players in through the door. No, actually, you'd rather play these games a little bit later on in the season when you're settled and you found some kind of flow and some kind of rhythm. I guess ultimately it doesn't matter how we've got here. We can sit and we can talk about tactical approaches and we can talk about games that we drew, like the game against City the other day, which a lot of people feel that we should have done more from the beginning to try and win. You can talk about the fact that we should have had at the absolute minimum a point from the game at Anfield and we didn't get anything in the end. All of those conversations, we've had them over and over and over again over the past few weeks. So I don't really want to go back down that route too much on today's pod. But what I will say is this does feel must win. This does feel crunch. This does feel really, really important. And I dread to think what the noise is going to be like if we are to drop points in this game and fall even further behind Liverpool, because some of what we've heard, read, listened to over the kind of last few days, it's hard to take, right? And it feels kind of overreactionary. But at the same time, if we end up 8 points behind, then if you're sitting there saying, oh, we can still win this title, look, of course we can still win it. But if you're sitting there saying, no, we're still going to win it convincingly, or that you're convinced, that that's the case, that we're still right in there, you'd be sort of going down the copium route a little bit, wouldn't you? In that, the likelihood of us sort of becoming good enough in terms of our own performances, but B, Liverpool dropping enough points as well to kind of claw that back, it's not very high. Like, even at this early stage in the season, I'm not saying Liverpool won't drop points, but I worry. I really, really worry because I just, I dread to think what the outlook's going to be like if we fall 8 points behind them, which is a real possibility because we've got an awful record at Newcastle of late. Newcastle have won each of their last 3 home games against Arsenal in all competitions without conceding a single goal, while they last won 4 in a row at home to the Gunners back in August 1969. So if you're into your stats and you're into your kind of history, then I suppose the last time they won 4 in a row was back in 1969. Therefore, it might not happen. It shouldn't happen based on the law of averages. Under Mikel Arteta, Arsenal have only lost more away games at Manchester City than they have away to Newcastle. So it's the second most challenging ground for us in terms of those away trips. Some encouraging numbers are these, though. Arsenal have lost just 1 of their last 16 Premier League away games. Though this did come last time out at Liverpool, they've only twice lost since May 2020. Sorry, only twice since May 2022 have the Gunners lost consecutive league games on the road, with the second defeat both times coming at Newcastle. Is it a must-win game? It absolutely is a must-win game. Now, there's going to be a lot of talk about the approach, and there's been a lot of discussion about the way Mikel has gone about certain matches recently, team selections, substitutions. People feel that the instructions he's passing on are sort of weighted towards the idea of domination and control, but don't really sort of encourage that aggression that we probably need as a team in order to just be that bit more ruthless in the final third and put opposition sides to the sword. I think for me, like, and I want to put this question out to you guys, right? And I will come into the chat for your answers on this because I think this is really, really interesting. What is taking off the handbrake? What does taking off the handbrake look like to you? Now, this is a phrase that's been bandied around quite a bit when talking about Arsenal over the past week or so, right? And it even goes back a little bit further. Release the handbrake, take off the handbrake, let the handbrake down, however you want to put it. What does that actually mean in terms of actions? Is it just about team selection? Is it about tactical instruction? Is it about mentality in terms of the message that you're drilling into your players? Or is it something that exists because subconsciously Mikel Arteta's planting a seed that maybe he doesn't realize that he's planting, or he doesn't want to be planting? Like I've always said, for instance, and we spoke about this on TalkSport 2 yesterday. Do you remember that example of when we were going to Anfield in the Amazon dock, and it was basically Mikel Arteta putting speakers on the pitch and sort of trying to, preempt what the atmosphere was going to be like, and trying to put it into his players' heads that they were going to face a barrage of noise and they needed to learn to kind of cut that out, and to just be kind of focused on the game at hand. I remember at the time, and I've said this many times since, and as I say, we discussed it on TS2 yesterday. I said that actually I think something like that can be counterproductive. Like, I understand the thinking behind it, even if I don't agree with it. But actually planting a seed that sort of almost strikes a fear into the player that says you're going to a really, really difficult ground, and you need to remember that, it means that if you push that message too far, you can end up with it having a negative impact. And I do think that it had a negative impact. So yeah, let's kind of look back on that and say, right, I think, Mikel maybe had the right intention. Well, not saying maybe, he absolutely, definitely had the right intentions there. Okay, there's no question about that. But unfortunately, sometimes things like that, they can either be genius or they can be detrimental. And I do feel like something like that, where you've essentially created a fear and an anxiety among your group that maybe wouldn't have existed if you didn't make such a big deal out of it. I think that type of thing is where we've kind of maybe gone wrong in the past. Then you're going to learn and you're going to develop as a manager and a coach, and you probably look back at that and think, maybe with hindsight, that wasn't the right thing to do, etc., etc. But when you go into a game like this one against Newcastle United, I can imagine that a lot of people will be saying, let the handbrake off, Mikel. Let's go out there flying out the traps. Let's take them on pound for pound on their own patch. We're good enough to do it. What does taking the handbrake actually look like for you? What needs to happen in order for you to come away from a game saying the handbrake was let off by Mikel Arteta? Because what is going to happen here is there's going to be a lot of outcome-based analysis. There's going to be people that say, if we go and score 3 goals, that we let the handbrake off. And well done, Mikel. You got it right today. You let the handbrake off. But the message might well be exactly the same as it's been in recent games. So what can he actually do from a realistic perspective? I don't want to hear airy-fairy stuff. I don't want to hear things that, are not likely or even possible. I want to hear what you would do as a manager that would constitute the idea of letting the handbrake off. And there's some interesting answers coming here. Cards MN says, taking the handbrake off to me looks like trusting your players to allow their playing style to shine, not focusing on possession and allowing players to press forward instinctively and trusting the team. Rumble says, taking off the handbrake means not having your best attacking players on the bench. I agree with that. What else have we got? Archangel says it's Arteta's system, control and possession. It forces other teams to park the bus. A team can attack too much. Okay. These are interesting points. Okay. And these are things that Mikel can actually do, right? He can actually make a selection that is more attack-minded. He can actually maybe make changes earlier. That's another thing that I'm sure people will sort of throw into the chat box. But let me give you a really, really interesting statistic that I came across earlier on social media, and I checked it out, and it's from Opta. So it's definitely legit. It's definitely a solid piece of information. Last weekend, the 20 Premier League clubs between them produced a combined total of just 19.4 expected goals. That is the lowest in any Premier League game week in Opta's record books since 2016. Let me repeat that. Last weekend, the 20 Premier League clubs between them produced a combined total of just 19.4 expected goals. That is the lowest in any Premier League game week in Opta's record books, which goes back to 2016. So my question now is, look, and we're not debating whether Arsenal need to be more attack-minded or need to be more free-flowing. We all agree on that. Whatever side of the fence you're on, we agree on that. My question is the cautiousness that we are maybe feeling nowadays when we're watching Arsenal, is it a new trend in the Premier League? Because we've seen Arne Slot do it against us at Anfield, and the game was only decided by a moment of brilliance. But you could argue on that day and in that game, if you take that free kick out of the equation, and I know really you shouldn't, because obviously that's what decided the game. But in terms of the two approaches of the two sides, I felt they were quite similar. Pep Guardiola, for the first time ever, as far as I can remember, turned up against an opposition and parked the bus. Now, I'm not saying that we can't do better, and I'm not saying that we don't need to be better or need to improve or need to, do things in a slightly different way. What I am simply saying is that there is a trend across the Premier League right now that means that teams are coming out and sort of playing more cautiously, or at least creating less. Let's say that they're creating less. I think this idea of dominance, control, restricting the opposition in certain spaces, it's not a Mikel Arteta idea. It is a modern day coaching ideology. And we're bringing in coaches to the Premier League from all over the world, and they're all doing very, very similar things. So either Mikel Arteta is this bloody genius that everybody wants to follow and copy, which I don't think is the case, or this is a trend in the modern game. And if you broaden your horizons a little bit and you look at the rest of the Premier League and you even look closer to home and you look at the games that we've been involved in, unless you're playing Ange ball, everybody else is playing a slightly more cautious and a slightly more restrictive style of football. Again, let me make the point, okay? I don't want to see us do that. I want to see us be more expansive. I think we've got the players to do it. I think ultimately that's how you're going to get over the line. You're going to let the match winners do what the match winners do. But it does feel to me like a lot of this is being kind of attributed to Mikel Arteta, when you have to look at players that are at times not doing enough in the final third. I mean, if someone gets the ball in the final third and decides to go on a dribble and gets it wrong, I don't think they're going to be berated by Mikel Arteta instantly or at halftime when they go into the changing room. Art Angel makes a great point. It's a Guardiola idea. He has strangled the game. Yes, you're absolutely right. That's what I'm saying. It's not an Arteta idea. It's something that comes from, the modern day trend in football, which has to a degree been set by Pep Guardiola, because in the last decade, he's been the most successful coach by quite some distance and by a country mile. So coaches are sort of taking things from Pep and, putting their own spin on it and doing it their own way. And they don't all have the same resources or players as Pep Guardiola. And so the result and the outcome in terms of what their coaching produces, it looks different. Now, again, I've sat here and I've said that our team selections at times this season have been wrong. I've said that in the past, we've prioritized physicality over creativity, that there's not enough spontaneity in the team. So please don't take it like I'm sitting here and saying everything's perfect at Arsenal and, there's nothing to be concerned or frustrated about. And actually, we should be heaping more and more praise on Mikel Arteta. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that if you zoom out, this is a broader thing. This is a broader issue. And it's to do with the current sort of trend in coaching philosophy. And we are seeing it week in, week out, right across the division, from the top end down to the bottom end. G. Will says, Harry, with a squad of this magnitude, it's a crime to play the way we're playing. Something has to change or Arteta has to go. Again, let me reiterate the point. I don't agree with the way that we're going about things. I do think we could be more expansive. I do think we can, to use the phrase, let the handbrake off, let the handbrake down, all the rest of it. I do. I really, really do. But are we sort of micro-analyzing Arteta's approach and overlooking the fact that this is a bit of a trend right now? And if teams go out on the pitch to cancel one another out, which is what Liverpool and Arsenal did to each other, and that's going to happen in the bigger games, it's what Pep Guardiola did to try and stop Arsenal, because Arsenal had initially cancelled. Like, there was all this back and forward, wasn't there? There was Arsenal go out and maybe pick a team that's designed to cancel out Manchester City, but then Manchester City get a goal. So then the pendulum shifts, and all of a sudden it's on Man City now to cancel out Arsenal. Cancelling each other out seems to be the priority right across the board right now. And that's just kind of the point I wanted to make on that. We talked a lot about the approach, and I guess one of the things when I've asked people, what they would do in terms of taking the handbrake off, like figuratively speaking, I don't want to hear philosophical stuff. I want to hear actual actions that can be taken to try and sort of put us in a better position in that sense. When I think about that, and I'm like, right, for me, the first thing is pick more creatives, pick more players that are capable of winning a football match, pick more players that are going to give you unpredictability, flair, spontaneity in the final third. That's kind of where my mind goes. I do want to see the approach changed overall, but hear me out here. Is this the game to do that in? I can hear your minds ticking. Newcastle away, is it the game in which you want to leave yourself just a little bit vulnerable, like sort of physically, in order to prioritize a bit more of that creativity and spark? I think this is the game that, more than most other games, you need to find the right balance. And the right balance on Sunday might not be picking two attack-minded eights, Eze on the left. That might not be the way to go. I hope that Martin Odegaard is fit and available, because if he is, and he can come into the side, and Arsenal have been building him up towards this game, then he can come in and he can bring us that equilibrium in midfield. A player that is good going both ways. Okay, if Kai Havertz was available, I'd be starting him up front instead of Victor Gyökeres. That's just me, because I'd want a player that can go both ways. I think that's really, really important against a team like Newcastle United and at a place like St. James's Park. I think for me, we're going to be in a physical battle. We've experienced that every single time we've played Newcastle of late, and particularly if they pick that midfield of Joe Linton, Tonali, and Bruno Guimaraes, we need a midfield that can give as good as it gets. And with Rice, Zubimendi, and Odegaard, I think we're closer to finding that right balance. Now, the Zubimendi point here is interesting as well, because everybody sort of looks at Zubimendi, looks at his quality on the ball, and says, he's got to be in the team. And actually, if you went back to last season or the season prior, when you looked at our midfield of Partey, Rice, and Odegaard, you thought that's really well balanced. Let me make this case. Martin Zubimendi physically is not as strong as Thomas Partey was. And so already the balance is different. Now, Arteta has, I think, accepted that and is willing to take that risk. And it's why he wants monsters at the back. It's why, we set up in the way that we do, and we look to protect certain areas the way that we do. But I do think that, the Rice, Zubimendi, and Odegaard midfield thing, it's great in that you've got a really good progressor from deep. You've got an absolute beast and an athlete in Declan Rice that can get up and down the pitch all day, and has got one hell of a set piece delivery on him. And then you've got Odegaard who can go both ways, but it's not quite as battle ready a midfield as the midfield would have been if it was Partey, Rice, and Odegaard. So for me, that just changes the balance of our midfield overall and in our team ever so slightly. So are we wrong to kind of expect that same balance as we had prior, which is, one of a really good footballing midfield, but a midfield that can dig in as well? Like the fact that we're playing with Zubimendi, Rice, and potentially Odegaard, if that's the way that Mikel goes, that's already a shift towards a more football-centric rather than physicality-centric approach, I would argue. Let's have a look at what you guys are saying in the live chat. It'll be interesting to hear what you guys are saying on this. Lots of criticism for Mikel Arteta. I don't want to go into that stuff again, man. How many days in a row are we going to do it? I want to hear things about the game itself. I want to hear things about how we can approach it, what we need to be doing. Theo says, Harry, the defensive approach hasn't worked the last 3 times we've played them. We lost all 3, so why not try something new? Yeah, I want us to try something new. All I'm saying is that there are a lot of Arsenal fans out there that will look at what they've seen in recent weeks and go, just look at the talent we've got. Like, forget about trying to be robust and solid, and actually just throw as many of those talented players on the pitch as you possibly can. And we're going to be a better football inside for it. However, my counter argument and the point that I'm making is that of all the games where you want to be a little bit lightweight, like against Forest, we were lightweight in midfield when we played without Declan Rice and we had Zubimendi and Nwaneri as 2 of the 3. Like, that was lightweight in my book, but it was us prioritizing technicality. And that was great to see on that particular occasion in that particular game. A game away at St. James's Park, a place that we've struggled at recently, I'm not sure that I would swing the balance completely the other way. I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. That's the kind of point I'm trying to make here. G Wills says, Harry, this is the problem. I think this is the game to use a sturdy midfield. My pick is a double pivot of Zubi and Rice and Eze as the 10. Zubi will get overrun if left alone. I agree with that. And that's reflected in my team selection. And I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do with Eze because I'll leave that for a little bit later on in the show. Otherwise, it'll be a spoiler. Gerald says, often we lose the midfield battle against Newcastle. So it's not easy, but we have to create. Marino, Rice and Zubimendi could mean another draw at best. I agree. I agree with you that, we do often lose the midfield battle to them. We can't afford to lose it here because they'll overrun us and they'll dominate us. I will say that it's not as good a Newcastle side as what we've come up against in the last couple of years, I'd imagine. You look at some of the players they've lost. I know they've brought a few in, but obviously they haven't had a great start to the Premier League season. That is fair to say that. Newcastle at the moment are down in 13th. They've won just once in the Premier League, drawn 3 times, lost 1. They're not easy to beat, but they're not blowing teams away either. So there's that factor into it, maybe. Possibly. Manny says the question is, where do you want to play your football against Newcastle? Do you want to defend deep or push high? Probably defend deep and hit them on the counter. In which case, if that's the plan, then you want to, you want to make a selection that sort of best suits that plan, doesn't it? And again, these are all really, really interesting questions. This is exactly the type of debate and discussion I want to have in the chat box. Fantastic today. Thank you, guys. Perez says, you still believe Zubi is not physical, Harry? He's not big, but he's as physical as they come. Come on. Like, he puts himself about as much as he possibly can. Yes. But this is the big boy Premier League. And if you don't have that physical power, there's only so far you can push it physically. And I saw him at Old Trafford at times be bypassed and the game completely sort of go around him and over him. And then when I wanted him to kind of really get on the ball and control things, I felt like we had to protect him all the time. And I think technically he's an unbelievable footballer. This is not me having a go at Zubimendi. My point is simply this. If you're going to play Martin Zubimendi and you're going to ask him to sit in that really deep midfield position and get on the ball and dictate, you have to protect him. You have to look after him. And it's the same way that we had to look after Jorginho. Jorginho, technically, one of the best midfielders in European football over the last, decade. And I'm not even exaggerating when I say that, but, at any stage in Jorginho's career, and I know we had him at the kind of back end of it, at any stage of his career, you always had to protect him, and you would have had to protect him if he was sitting at the base of a midfield in the Premier League. Chelsea didn't want to do that. That's why they couldn't make it work. He moves on, he comes to Arsenal, and he works a lot better because Arteta recognized what exactly needed to happen in order to get the best out of him without his weaknesses coming back to bite you in the arse. Andrew says, we haven't seen the best of Zubi yet. I agree with that. He says he's still bedding in and he hasn't had many games. with Martin Odegaard and Rice yet. If they can get a run of games together, we might see Arteta's plan come to fruition. Yeah, and again, that's another factor that, you know, the naysayers will overlook and they'll sort of ignore. You know, there's a lot of things that just bring to light, you know, the context of so many of the situations that we're discussing that people, if they're on one side of the fence, just don't want to chat about. St. Francis says, Harry, Barcelona's midfield isn't physical. It's technical, and they bopped Newcastle off the park. We think physical because we're in the EPL, and that's the current default setting. Go technical. Let's play Wenger ball. Yeah, but like that's not the way that our squad has been built. Like some of the midfield players that Barcelona have are out of this world, technically sound and good. And we don't have that because we've been built in a different way. We've been built to play the physical game because overall, bigger picture, that's what Mikel Arteta and Arsenal believe is the way to win this division and to win this league. Again, people can have their questions around that, but that's what we've built. And so we can't just, you know, flip out of our mode and go into a completely different zone and ideology and philosophy just like that and play like Odegaard, Nwaneri and Zubimendi in midfield. We'll get eaten alive. We'll get eaten alive. The N16 says, what's more important, strength or football in IQ? Both of those things are really important. Both of them are really important. Okay, let's take it on then to discuss the lineup. What would your lineups be? Get them in the live chat. I'd love to hear from you. I'm going to share mine with you now. I thought long and hard about this, and the selection that I've made is based on Martin Odegaard being available. But if he's not, I'll share with you an alternative side as well. So my team would line up like this. I'm going with Raya in goal. I'm going with Timber back in the side, Saliba, Gabriel, and Calafiori across the back line. That's what I'm going with. And then in the midfield, I'm going Rice, Zubimendi as a double pivot, with Odegaard playing just in front of them, Saka on the right, Eze on the left, and Gyökeres through the middle. I think with Rice and Zubimendi as a double pivot, and Calafiori just maybe being a little bit more disciplined, I'd feel confident in giving Eze a role on that left-hand side where when we're without the ball, he has to, you know, help out, track the fullback, etc. But when we've got the ball, I'm happy for him to roam. I'm happy for him to drift. And if we're talking about letting the handbrake off and allowing players to go and roam and be that bit more spontaneous, I'd love to see Odegaard get out there at times and combine with Eze, the two of them. If Odegaard's got that luxury of being able to play just off of Victor Gyökeres, knowing that there's that double pivot of Rice and Zubimendi behind him, then he can go and get close to Saka, which we know he enjoys doing. He can get close to Gyökeres, so he's not such an isolated figure. And he can go out left and support Eze. He can even swap with Eze at times. I mean, who would expect Martin Odegaard to pop up on the left flank? Who would expect him and Eze to rotate positions? There's so much fluidity in that final third if we have that sturdy base in midfield. And in a home game against somebody else, I would be saying something completely different. It is horses for courses. I keep saying that. But away at Newcastle, the only way you can empower your attackers to roam, to be spontaneous, and to sort of drift around and switch positions is if you have a sturdy base. And that sturdy base only exists at St. James's Park for me if Rice and Zubimendi play like a double pivot. So that is really, really important, I would say. Now, in the event that Odegaard is not fit enough to play, then again, I'm doing something a little bit different. And I'm bringing Gabriel Martinelli into the team. Now, I know he frustrates people when he starts games, but I would have him out on the left-hand side because with Martinelli there and working back and supporting and becoming part of like a four in midfield when we're without possession, because we know Saka can do the work as well to help out with Juri and Timber, then I'm giving Eze a free role. And then hopefully I get to see the best out of Eberechi Eze. Also, with Martinelli playing on the left-hand side, it just unlocks Ricardo Calafiori a lot more for me because what it does is it means that Calafiori knows he's got a winger playing in front of him that will put the work in and will cover him at the right points, and is happy to turn back and sprint towards his own goal when necessary. So I think it's balance. Balance is the key thing here. You got to pick combinations that work. You got to pick combinations that better kind of what's the word I'm looking for here? That better kind of platform some of the other players to go out and do what they're best at. Yeah, so that's what I would go with. That's how I envisage it, or that's how I see the game playing out, and that's what I would do at the weekend. Interested to get your predictions as well from the live chat, so start putting them in. My prediction is I think we're going to win 1-0. I think we're going to shithouse our way to a 1-0 victory. We're going to hopefully make up some points on Liverpool, because that trip to Selhurst Park, I mean, they could easily win it, and I'm sure they're going to win it with a 89th minute goal off of someone's backside or something like that. But I think, if they were to drop points, I mean, what an opportunity it would be for us to then be able to just eat into that lead that they already have with a victory up at St. James's Park. If they win, then it's about damage limitation and making sure that we, that we get over the line and make sure that gap doesn't increase any further. But for Arsenal, I think to win at St. James's Park would be good, because it would send a bit of a message out. It would be a bit of a statement. It's a ground that we've not been very good at recently, that we've struggled at recently, and it'd be Arsenal sort of overcoming a hurdle. And I think that would just change the narrative a little bit. Some of the narrative around Arsenal at the moment is quite frankly a joke. Some of it's ridiculous. So much of it is being, as Clive Palmer would say, so much of it is being shaped by people who don't have Arsenal's best interests at heart. And I'm not saying that you have to agree with everything that the manager does or be satisfied with everything that you see or whatever. As fans, we have a right and an opinion, and that is absolutely fine. But just think about where those opinions are stemming from. Think about the context around what we're discussing. And if you still come to that conclusion, absolutely fine. But there's too many people just jumping on bandwagons and wanting to have a pop at their own club, which I just don't get. My default setting is always to protect my club because I'm supporting them. And if I'm upset about something, it's because I'm genuinely upset about it. But, I just feel like there's a lot of fake outrage, if you like. And I don't like that. I don't like that. Rumble's changed his prediction about 15 times in the live chat. He says, I said I wasn't satisfied with the manager yesterday, and everyone in the comments had a go at me. Yeah, but that just goes to show, doesn't it, that the broader feeling around Mikel Arteta is not get him out, he's useless, blah, blah, blah. And that it is not the majority of people that feel that way. And I'm not saying that the majority are always right. Look at Brexit, for God's sake. The majority aren't always right, but the opinion on him generally, it hasn't turned. It hasn't swung completely that way. And there's a lot of people that are just hoping for him to fail, hoping that he's sacked. So they can go, I told you from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever the case is. And I was right. Come on, man. We all want the team to win. We all want the team to succeed. I think there is a lot of I think there's good reason to be irritated by some of his comments recently in the press conferences. I do. I didn't like that whole thing about, my phone was blowing up with CEOs and all that. I didn't like that. I felt that was a man just a little bit too desperate to kind of prove his point. And I felt like he was better off just kind of saying, look, that's the team I picked. That's the way I wanted to go. And unfortunately, we didn't win the game. But, I know that I did what I thought was best at the time. That's the way I think he should have handled it. That's the way I think he should have handled it. Inner Circle says, so how long is long enough, Harry? Well, let's have a conversation at the end of the season or at any point in the season where it looks like everything is lost. At that point, I'm willing to have the conversation. I'm willing to have the discussion. I just don't really see the benefit of, going massive at a time where things can still swing the other way, where things can still improve, and where we're still in with a shout of winning some of the game's biggest prizes and biggest honors. If we were to fall 8 points behind at the weekend and you want to have a conversation about it, I'll entertain it. If you want to have a conversation once we're eliminated from the Champions League, I'll entertain it. If we go out the cups, I'll entertain it. I've got no problem with that. I just think it's all a bit knee-jerk. We're 5 games into the season, and people need to chill. Is what I'm saying. And maybe you'll be proven right. Maybe you won't. The truth is, we don't know that. So we're going to have to wait and see. Right. Let's leave it there for today. Thank you so much for joining me on today's live stream. I really do appreciate it. If you are with us via YouTube, if you wouldn't mind leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, I'd really appreciate that. If you are joining us via Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review. That really does help. And if you want to check us out on Patreon, you can, and you can do it now by clicking on this wonderful fancy QR code at the top of your screens as you're watching us. Otherwise, the link is in the description if you're like me and old school and can't be bothered with the QR codes. But there are people that like them. So here it is. Check it out. Sign up on Patreon. You can sign up for free as well, and you'll get access to some of our written pieces. But if you sign up as a full member, you'll get every single episode ad-free, and you'll get bonus content as well around all our Premier League games and some others as well. So yeah, check it out, and I will see you all very soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful Friday. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.